And we are back. All right, everybody, welcome to our Friday Fireside chat as we officially get started into the conversation. So, today's conversation, as I was just mentioning to some folks who had joined us early, is all about living intentionally and inviting the God of your understanding into everything that you do, and the importance of forgiveness as a part of that equation. So, let's just start with living intentionally and also how we can begin to invite that, the God of our understanding, into our lives. There are a lot of wisdom traditions that encourage us to do that, from Christianity to Islam to, the idea of practicing presence in Buddhism and Vedic traditions. And really, what we're talking about here is tapping into our God essence and really kind of our essential nature. And that what happens as human beings is that we walk around thinking that we are this conscious mind, that who we are is what we know of ourselves in terms of our personality structures and the ways in which our ego, if you will, sort of hijacks our system and tells us to operate in the world, usually as a mechanism for survival. And very often we forget who we are and what we are made of. And so this idea of inviting God into everything that you do and living intentionally in terms of the practical application of it can look as simple as waking up in the morning, setting not only an intention for your day in terms of who do I want to be today? How do I want to show up in the world? But also choosing to be intentional in what we call segment intending, right? As you start every sort of new chapter of the day, that you can be intentional in the way you start that. So maybe I'm going to sit down to start my work for the day. Well, who do I want to be as I sit down for this next 90-minute block of work? Who do I want to be as I am, going to engage with my partner or my kids, after they come home from having their day? Who do I want to be as I embark on my exercise routine or whatever it is? Who do I want to be when I get in my car? So setting an intention for whatever segment of your day you're getting into. And then at the same time that you're setting that intention, saying a little prayer and just saying, again, the way that I like to phrase it is Mother, Father, God, creator of all that is, because I find that's all encompassing. It's not gender specific, and it's sort of just an all-inclusive way of saying, hey, the God of my understanding, I'm going to ask that you join me in this car ride so that I can remember who I am and come from my heart from a place of presence. I invite you to come into the work I'm going to do in the world today. I'm going to ask that you ultimately take the reins in those moments when I'm not sure what to do because my limited human capacity doesn't let me necessarily have the answers, that I'm going to give it on up to you and say, you know what, God, as it says in the Course in Miracles, and Marianne Williamson often says, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? So you're literally inviting spirit, you're inviting divine guidance into your life in all that you do. And when we do that, right, what that lends itself to is a more spiritually aligned existence and more opportunity for presence. So how does forgiveness fit into that equation? Well, the idea of forgiveness is the letting go of the negativity that you are holding on to, whether it's something you need to forgive inside of yourself or whether it's something that you need to forgive in somebody else. But that you're ultimately choosing to say, I want to be free of this albatross around my neck, this, ball and chain of negative or low frequency vibration that I'm hauling around with me as I hold on to unforgiveness. I had said before that Nelson Mandela says practicing unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping somebody else perishes. And that's really true. And so as we invite the God of our understanding into everything that we do, we can and are more available to practice the idea of forgiveness. Because we know, and every wisdom tradition says, that God is love. that to be godlike is to forgive, is to not only forgive the trespasses that have been made against us, but also to be compassionate to ourselves, to forgive ourselves for our shortcomings and our humanness. So really these ideas go hand in hand, they go together. And when we can live intentionally with presence and allow the God of our understanding into everything that we do throughout the course of our day, we practice more presence. We're able to be the better version of ourselves. We're able to be that intention that we've set for ourselves for the day or for that segment. But then we're also able to be forgiving when we fall asleep, when we forget who we are, when we don't invite God into everything that we're doing. Because truth is, we're human beings, we're imperfect, and we are going to fall asleep. That's the game. Fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep, wake up. Forget who you are, remember, forget, remember. How long can you stay present? Meaning, how long can you stay awake, right, throughout the course of your day? And I think if you can remember that you have fallen asleep, right, just remember to remember, then you can be more forgiving of yourself and you can be more forgiving of other people because you recognize that they too are the essence of God made manifest, right? And you can recognize the light in them and recognize a key tenet of belief system or a paradigm that, very successful people subscribe to, which is that people are not their behaviors. That when we exhibit poor behavior, and I'm talking everything from, inadvertently and unintentionally, crossing a line with someone to deliberately causing harm, that people are not their behaviors, that we are the sum total of all of our wounds, all of our experiences, all of our influences, all of our programming, right? And so when we can begin to recognize that we have within us the capacity to do harm onto ourselves and to other people, from, again, the whole spectrum of behaviors, that we're capable of that as human beings, that we're all capable of anything, we can remember then that those behaviors are what happens when we fall asleep. Now, the degree to which we fall asleep is also going to be indicative of how we behave in the world, right? So I know big concepts, lots of things, but what I want to offer is the opportunity to ask some questions about some of this and for us to dig a little bit deeper. We're roughly about 7 minutes in, and so I just want to know from you guys, how does this sit? How does this resonate? If you're watching it in real time, leave a comment. If you're watching the replay, leave a comment and let's get into this. This is big stuff that we're talking about. How do I live intentionally? How do I remember to invite the God of my understanding into everything I do when I'm really activated and I have truly fallen asleep? When I do remember who I am, how can I forgive? Sam is saying, how to forgive, especially if hurt is deep emotionally, it takes time. I'm going to say it does take time and it doesn't. And what I mean by that is it can take time for us to remember, right? It can take time for us to tap into our God essence because maybe we've fallen asleep so much that we don't know that we are so capable of acting from a place of love. But once we get to that space where we are willing to forgive, the forgiveness and that shift and that change happens instantaneously. So you might need to go through the process of forgiving someone repeatedly because maybe you continue to fall back asleep. But once you choose to really let it go, you've let it go. And you'll notice too that it's not about letting anybody else off the hook, right? So it's not about, I'm condoning your behavior. It's about the freedom that you get by letting it go, right? That you get to lay that down, that burden of the emotions that you've been hauling around with you, the negative emotions, the low frequency emotions that you're carrying around with you by not forgiving somebody, right? The only person that truly benefits, I wouldn't say the only person, but the person who primarily benefits from the forgiveness is you. Now, does that also lend itself to the other person maybe starting to shift and transform a bit because you've changed your energetic frequency with them? Certainly it does. I'll tell you from my personal experience that when I forgave somebody, all of a sudden they started to show up differently. Now, you can also choose to never, engage with that person again, depending on the degree of the transgression, right? I mean, if somebody has physically harmed you, you may not want to have an ongoing relationship with them. But I'm talking, in terms of my, people that I'm going to have in my life forever, like my mother, or family members, or dear friends of mine, that once that forgiveness has taken place, all of a sudden they start behaving differently, even if you never actually articulated to them that you've forgiven them. So, example is Wayne Dyer used to say, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. So forgive somebody and don't be surprised for a minute if all of a sudden they start showing up in your world differently. So Sam says that I have observed, I guess it's energy. It is energy. And really, when you actually forgive someone, in the Hawaiian tradition, they say in the spirit of aloha, meaning from your heart, and in the spirit of love, you've forgiven someone, the energy does change pretty instantaneously. But it really just depends on, have I truly forgiven this person from my heart? And am I really ready to put this burden down? Or do I need to carry it around a little longer until I'm ready to actually let it go? So I think this is such a rich conversation. Again, for those of you who might be joining in real time, Rohit, thank you for the gift. You're so sweet. If you're joining us now, we're talking about living with presence and living intentionally, and how by doing that, you not only live more in alignment with who you are and with the God of your understanding being invited into all that you do, but that it lends itself to your capacity to forgive. And remember, forgiveness includes you. So remember that when you forgive somebody else, ultimately what you're forgiving in them is something that is, in fact, inside of you. I have often said in a sort of tongue-in-cheek manner, if you spot it, you got it, meaning that on some level, if you see something or something has occurred in your life to some smaller degree or in some sort of unique way, you have that thing inside of you. Now, that doesn't mean that if, again, you have been physically assaulted, that you're somehow a physically violent person. But like I said, we're all capable of doing harm onto ourselves and onto others. And that could be by way of our thoughts, our words. In yoga, we call it ahimsa, non-harming. So we don't have to necessarily be physically, violent to understand that we have inside of us the capacity to do harm, right? Because that's really what being physically violent is an example of. And so as we forgive somebody else for something that they did to us, we're not making that behavior okay. In fact, we're saying, I recognize your humanness, right? And that your behavior is a representation of your human construct, but that I also see the divine in you, and I see that I can forgive the person, but not necessarily have to condone the behavior. I hope that helps. Yes, Sam says, I think it all starts with thoughts. 100%. It does. And what is at the root of our thoughts? If we kind of deconstruct that from a neuroscience perspective, thoughts are byproduct of our beliefs. Our beliefs are byproducts of our deeper programming, which can consist of our values and other sort of deep-seated programs that reside in our unconscious. So Rohit says, agreed, Sam. My belief is also thoughts generate the energy. Yes, thoughts actually have energetic frequency. What rich conversation. So they've actually been able to prove scientifically that when you think a thought, it's not happening in here. It's actually happening out here. It gives off an energetic frequency. So if you're sitting in the thought of unforgiveness, if you're sitting in the sort of rumination of all of those low frequency emotions, well, guess what? That's what you're giving off. That's what's your energy is emanating, so to speak. And so why not do ourselves a solid, right? And decide that we want to vibe higher by not sugarcoating and spiritual bypassing. Y'all know that I'm not big on that, right? Not pretending that we don't feel what we feel, but actually processing the emotion, actually doing the work of releasing and doing the work of heartfelt, genuine forgiveness. There are processes for that. One of them that I like to use in my work is Ho'oponopono. Some of you might have heard of this before. There are a lot of folks who are talking about it. It's the Hawaiian forgiveness process. You know, a lot of people do the meditation, but I have been fortunate enough to be trained in this modality and to actually do the process as it was handed down through a 28, generation lineage that I learned from. So I just want to say that there are ways to do this that feels real, where you're not sugarcoating or spiritual bypassing, but you're doing the actual work of getting to the place of genuine forgiveness, cutting the cords, letting it go, and saying, I'm free of it. I can put that down. And it does affect your energy frequency. It does lend itself to you vibing higher. So, wow, what cool dialogue that we've had here. I just want to check and see if we've got any comments on the other platforms. We do not. So here I am. I'm back with you guys on Perform Live. Listen, I just want to say I'm so grateful to be here with all of you week after week on Friday to do these fireside chats. We will continue to do them. No fireside chat next week unless we find that the retreat that I'm attending is done in time for me to do it. So stay tuned. We'll let you know that day if the fireside chat is happening. Next Friday at 2:30, I'm attending a spiritual retreat at Esalen. So the schedule is going to be a little different. No yoga this week either, this next week. So Tuesday yoga is canceled this week. We'll be back again next week. We'll post some guided meditation that you guys can do. So be sure to check out the social media platforms for that. Yes, thank you. Rohit says, look at that. Good for you. Yeah, so going to go on a little 5-day spiritual retreat. I will certainly miss all of you. My hope is that we can be back on Friday for our fireside chat. It's really just going to depend on what time that retreat wraps up. I think we'll be able to do it. So just stay tuned. We'll post it on Perform Live and on all the other channels if we are going to do it that day. All right. And yes, I will certainly share my insights with all of you when I get back from the retreat. You got it. Sending you all so much love and light and aloha from my heart to yours. Namaste.